The other day on Tucker Carlson, there was an interview with Douglas McGregor, and a very startling number was mentioned, that 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers had died in this war, this proxy war between NATO and Russia.
Ukrainians now, we think, have lost 400,000 men killed in battle. We were talking about 350,000 a few months ago. Within the last month of this supposed counteroffensive, which was to sweep the battlefield, they lost at least 40,000 killed.
A few days ago actually, in the Western media, and you don't often see this, there was this article, I think it was in The Guardian, about tens of thousands of Ukrainian men who were trying to avoid being conscripted into the Ukrainian army. In Ukraine, everybody knows somebody who's died in this war. Everybody knows somebody who died in this war in Ukraine. And what all of the Western media have failed to do since day one is acknowledge the reality that Ukraine always had, the largest Russian-speaking population outside of Russia. That's a reality. It's not made up. Ukraine has the largest Russian-speaking population outside of Russia. The actor President Zelensky, his native language in his home when he was a child was Russian, wasn't Ukrainian. Ukraine shares a lot with each other, in the sense that the Ukrainian language isn't a million miles away from Russian. They're both Slavic languages. They share the same religion. Most Ukrainians are Orthodox. Most Russian. They say food. So many other things. And yes, during this war, divisions have been hyped up to such an extent that we have seen 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers, apparently. Let's say it's half that. For argument's sake, let's say Tucker Carlson's in his latest podcast was hyping it up. Let's say it's only 200,000. For argument's sake. And it's 200,000 Russian soldiers, for argument's sake. But if it's anywhere between 200 and 400,000, it's still a lot of soldiers. And then you have to consider how many soldiers are wounded for life, with amputations, lost limbs. I mean, any of the wars we've seen, you see all of these wounded veterans. You only have to see it in the UK. Wounded veterans in wheelchairs. And that's the reality of war. That's the reality of war that is being funded by the West. Billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars being funded by the West. We've seen Zelensky do round after round after round of trips around the West looking for support. And what he needs now is not just arms, he needs an army. And this is the reality. We all know this. Ukraine needs an army. You can send as many arms as you like into a country, but if you don't have a growing army, you can't fight a war. And let's remember, for every one Ukrainian soldier, there are 14 Russian soldiers. Russia is, that's the realities, guys. Russia has weapons, and it has support from its allies. Small country like China happens to support Russia. Let's not forget this. And so we're moving in now, closing in, ending this second year of the war and embarking on the third year of the war. And next week we have the Pope, an elderly Pope, travelling possibly to Moscow. Either next week or the 4th of September, he may travel to Moscow as he goes to a country called Mongolia, which has practically no Catholic population as percentages of populations go. It has an infinitesimal small Catholic population, not even 2,000. And not that I'm against him going to Mongolia. I think it's good that he's going. But why is he going? It's not to see them. He's going because this country is sandwiched between two countries, between China and Russia. Let's forget, China has, forgot about the Vatican deal, and they're off doing what they like with their own bishops, and the Pope has had to rubber stamp it. And in the Russian media, they've reported that the Pope may refuel in Moscow. And I don't think any Catholic can be blind to the reality. that the Pope going to Moscow has been something that's appeared in prophecy over the last number of years. Because what happens after he comes back from Russia? I'll let you do your own research. What happens when the Pope comes back after Russia? We have a synod coming up in October, and there's never been more division in the Catholic Church. There's never been more division in the Catholic Church over an event like this synod. There was nothing like this if you look at pre-Vatican II. There wasn't. And yet we look at now, as we approach this synod, cardinals against cardinals, bishops against bishops. Where was that spoken about? Again, do your research. Our God, heaven isn't quiet in preparing us. Heaven isn't quiet in asking us to pray. Heaven isn't quiet in these times. And I think any normal Catholic will see these events unfolding. It is cataclysmic. It is apocalyptic to see that level of tragedy occurring in Ukraine in these times. To say that there's even one soldier to die is sad. But it's not one soldier. Hundreds of thousands have died in this proxy NATO-Russia war. When Russia invaded Georgia to protect the Russian-speaking enclaves in Georgia and circled Tbilisi, they surrendered and gave up the Russian-speaking enclaves. You didn't see hundreds of thousands of Georgians die during that conflict. And yet, Ukraine's actor president keeps sending tens of thousands of his own soldiers to be slaughtered by Russians over regions that are mainly Russian speaking, because nobody can deny the reality that the largest Russian speaking population outside of Russia lives in Ukraine. You know, it's not like Russia has invaded Spain. It's not like Russia has invaded the US. Probably would never do that, or any other country. Russia protects its own interests, always has, always will, and will always protect Russian-speaking populations. That's a reality. And failure to see that is failure to understand how Russia acts and how Putin acts. And I think now that things are going to get very fast in the next couple of weeks as Zelensky tries to get support for an army, which is what he needs. It's either an army or peace negotiations. Will the West allow Putin to win? It's a big question. Let's see. But I do think we will see the Pope trying to negotiate peace in the next couple of weeks. Either the end of next week, trying to refuel as he goes to Mongolia, or when he comes back on the 4th of September. And if he does, remember this video. And pray for the Pope. Pray for these times. Pray for peace. Because if NATO sends an army into Ukraine, if any of the NATO countries sends an army into Ukraine, it will mean that Europe will be at war with Russia. Europe could be at war with Russia and China. Things could speed up very, very quickly, and events could speed up very quickly. So we have a lot of things happening that, has been spoken about long ago. We have a war on a war that could erupt into Europe. That's the reality, guys. We have a synod that has never caused so much division as it is at the moment. I see a conference flyer going around that Cardinal Gerhard Müller is speaking at a conference with Archbishop Vigano. We have Cardinal Burke, who's edited for a book that is saying, well, look, we're going into schism. So I'm just saying all these things were prophesied. They were spoken about because heaven prepares. Heaven prepares, and we need to prepare spiritually to pray in these times. Not to be afraid, it's just to acknowledge the reality of a war. The reality that the Pope is going to fly either through Russian airspace or Chinese airspace next week. That's a reality. It's going to happen. Is he going to come back and land in Moscow? Who knows? This is the reality that's been reported in the Russian media. We don't know, so let's see. I think we must pray, not be naive about what is happening in the world today. What we're seeing, people can ignore prophecy and ignore what Our Lady has been warning us about in Akita, in Fatima, in Garabandal, and all these, in Rwanda. Remember, Our Lady appeared in Rwanda, in Quebec.
3 young girls received visions about their own spiritual life and the spiritual life of the community, but then later a series of shocking, dark visions about a tragedy, a violence that was to visit the country. Indeed, almost 10 years later, civil war broke out in Rwanda between Hutu and Tutsi, culminating in a genocide which claimed the lives of over 800,000 people.
She appeared there and warned them. That did happen. It's a proved Marian apparition. And what happened in Rwanda? We saw 1 million people die. That happened. That's historical. That's a fact. That's an approved apparition. Our Lady appeared in Akita, warning us, telling us, if you go down that road, you're going to bring a chastisement on yourselves.
その時までは私の娘を私の修練女よという呼びかけでお話しくだされましたですけど、その時はマリア様は愛する私の娘よ、この時はすごく厳しいお声でした。愛する私の娘よ、これから私が話そうとすることをよく聞きなさい。そしてあなたの頂上に告げなさい。前にも伝えたように、もし人々が悔い改めないなら、御父は人類の上に大いなる罰を下そうとされております。その時、御父は大洪水よりも、重い、今までにない罰を下さるに違いありません。火が天から下り、その災いによって人類の多くの人々が死ぬでしょう。良い人も悪い人と共に、司祭も信者と共に死ぬでしょう。生き残った人々には、死んだ人を羨むほどの苦難があるでしょう。その時、私たちに残された武器はロザリオと恩子の残された印だけです。毎日ロザリオの祈りを唱えてください。ロザリオの祈りをもって司教司祭のために祈ってください。悪魔は教会の中まで入り込み、カルジナルはカルジナルに、司教は司教に対立するでしょう。私を敬う司祭は同僚から軽蔑され、攻撃されるでしょう。祭壇や教会は荒らされ、教会は妥協するものでいっぱいになり、悪魔の誘惑によって多くの司祭や修道者がやめるでしょう。特に悪魔は御父に捧げられた霊魂に働きかけております。たくさんの霊魂を失うことは私の悲しみです。これ以上罪が続くなら、もう罪の許しはないでしょう。 勇気を持ってあなたの頂上に告げてください。あなたの頂上は祈りと贖罪の技に励むことを一人一人に伝えて熱心に祈るように命じるでしょうというような、そういう厳しいお言葉でございました。
If you turn away from God, we bring the chastisement on ourselves. It's like an alcoholic turning to alcohol. God doesn't send it. You bring that chastisement on yourself by turning away from the truth that your liver is not meant to be destroyed by alcohol. That's the truth. Our liver is not meant to be destroyed by alcohol. If we turn away from the truth, we bring a chastisement on ourselves. It's the same with humanity. You turn away from God, you bring a chastisement on yourself. We see it in our families. We turn away from natural law, man and woman having children, fostering families, family life. What do we bring into our society? An epidemic of depression. You know, I've never heard so many stories about suicide over the last number of days, and the epidemic of drug abuse in Ireland. But to acknowledge, to ask Catholics to pray, please pray in these times. Please pray. You would need to have your head in the sand not to realise the times we live in. These are the times we live in. Our Lady, when she appeared in Medjugorje, she said, Mir, mir, mir. Peace, peace, peace. And mir is not just peace in the local language in Herzegovina. Mir is actually the word for peace in Russian and Ukrainian, by the way. Peace, peace, peace. Peace, peace, peace. I think all of these prophecies are for our times. Look at the times we live in. Don't put your head in the sand. Bring people to Christ. Return to confession. You know, live in a state of grace. Don't be afraid. Because none of these messages are meant to be afraid. Because remember, Christ is leading us to his kingdom, which is a kingdom of peace. And always remember that Our Lady will triumph. Her Immaculate Heart will thrive. But we can't ignore the prophecies. Our Lady came in Rwanda. She warned people. We don't say, oh, no, that was, why you shouldn't have been afraid then. You shouldn't ignore these things. Our Lady never says bad things about stuff in the future. Blah, blah. Excuse me, come on, guys. She went to Fatima. She said the war will end, but a worse war will come. Did it come? Did it come? Look at the world we live in. Do we think we're going closer to God or away from God? Are we any happier with this? With all of the resources we have? I say this in Ireland. We seem to be held up. Oh, you're a great nation. We're this. 600 men take their life every year. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And then many of them, you know, living in depression and suicides and fears, and because they've no hope. They've no hope. And if one thing about our faith, it's a faith of hope. We have to give hope. Even in these times of trials, even in what's coming, we have to stand there as leaders of hope. And it's important to pray. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. It's been reported in the Russian media that Pope Francis wants to go to Rome. I think to Moscow. It's no secret that he wants to go to Moscow. He met with the Russian bishop in Hungary. His name, I'm drawing a blank, but he used to be the second in command in Moscow before he got moved to Hungary. He's already met with Patriarch Kirill in Cuba, and I think we will see the Pope try to end this war by negotiating peace in Moscow. So pray for these times. You know, it's a very, very sad situation to be living, and I don't think the media, as definitely in the West, is reporting the reality that Russia's winning or Russia's losing and Ukraine is winning and everything's rosy over in Ukraine. They just need a few more arms. They'll be fine. Keep carrying on. It's not what's happening, guys. It's not what's happening. Because Russia and Ukraine will continue this war until there's peace. And the only way to negotiate peace is to accept reality, and I don't think that's going to happen. Ukraine's puppet actor president, that's being funded by NATO, will keep fighting until the funding stops, and it doesn't seem that's going to stop anytime soon. So pray, and I do ask people, if you accept Fatima, if you accept Akita, an approved apparition, Garabandal, okay, some debate there. Quebeco was approved. Medjugorje, there's been a lot of debate about it. All of these things, they all line up for these times. They all line up for these times. Where was the synod mentioned? This famous synod at work. This famous synod that's coming in October. Where was it mentioned? It's very we saw in Ireland, fascinating in Ireland, guys, fascinating. The bishop of Raphoe, he said that the synod should be anchored on tradition and scripture. Very interesting. An Irish bishop pushing back against this synod. It should be anchored on tradition and scripture. Of course. What are Flemish bishops blessing? Where did they pop that out of tradition or scripture? They're heretics. Along with the German bishops, they're heretics. And who's going to call them out as heretics? Leading people to hell, out of the church. Leaders that are not able to stand up for the faith, that are not able to preach the faith, they're heretics. And that's the simple reality. It's very easy to give in to the world, and it's difficult to stand up and speak and preach the truth. And so pray for these times. God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye.